If you lost every piece of Christian literature ever written by anyone, and all you had were the remarks and reports of non-Christians in the first 100 years, here's what you'd know about Jesus. If you're writing in the first century in the Egyptian area, these are the most popular names for Jewish men.
Outside of Joseph, I don't know none of them. Can't even think about pronouncing them.
None of those are in our, well, only one, Joseph, pretty popular, in our New Testament accounts. But it turns out the most popular first names for men in the area of Palestine are these names.
Okay, now we talk.
The names that appear in our Gospels.
Yeah.
So it appears that the Gospel authors at least know what people are called in the first century in the region in which they're writing. And that's why you don't have any names except for the big ones in the Gnostic Gospels, because they don't know what they were calling people over there. These are all false Gospels. These Gnostic Gospels coming out of Egypt, usually when it comes to cities, they will only mention one city, Jerusalem. Why? Because that's all they knew from over there in Egypt. Yet the Gospel authors writing in the region early knew all the names of the cities that were in the region early.
Hey, yo.
Why did they know? Because they're writing them in the region early. This kind of simple thing confirms something for us. There's another way to go. What if I had another eyewitness, an ancient eyewitness that wasn't a Christian?
Hey, yo, real quick, I just got to say this, man. When it comes to evidence, I'm trying to figure out what y'all need. That's news to me, by the way. I ain't think of it like that before. That they didn't have the things that we have now where we can actually know what certain villages or places are called because we have internet so we can search these things. But back then they didn't do that. So if what this brother's saying is true when it comes to these Gnostic Gospels that aren't necessarily getting into the details of what's going on around the time, ooh, man, it's a strong indication that there's a reason why they're dated late. There's a reason why, because obviously they don't even know about the people, the time frame, or anything like that, the places around. But in the scriptures, it's all there. It's all evident, all divinely inspired. Nowadays, and at least for a long time, myself included, I go through the social media world and I see things like, well, how is Peter and Paul and Joseph and all these people with Jesus, right? Jesus, that's a Hispanic name. How are these white name people with Jesus? That don't make sense. Not realizing transliterations and things of that nature and how names change via how we speak and pronounce them. So you add that to, what's going on. The real evidence is out there, y'all. The real evidence is out there. If you get away from the nonsense that people produce because of videos like the Da Vinci Code and or Zeitgeist, you can get down to the nitty gritty. That's why I'm thankful for these brothers right here. Cold Case Christianity. If you're not following them, you need to follow them. J. Warner Wallace and Jimmy Warner or Jimmy Wallace. Sorry if I forgot the brother's name, but Cold Case Christianity. These brothers are getting it in. Let's get back to it.
What do the pagans, the non-Christians, say about Jesus in the years closest to the life of Jesus? Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll look at a few of them and we'll write down what they're saying over here. Now, I want to just launch something at you for a second. If I must step out of the light, sorry, I have to do that. If there's a robbery occurring, a bank robbery, and you're a witness to it, and I come over here and I rob this teller, and I reach across the counter, and I say, give me all your money. And then I ask you later, what happened? And you say, I reached across the counter. You say, give me all your money. Now, what kind of corroborative evidence could I find at the counter to confirm her eyewitness account? Fingerprints. I should find a palm print in the direction that she says I leaned. And if I found that palm print, that would be corroborative evidence of what she said in her eyewitness accounts. But would the palm print tell me anything about what I said?
Nah.
Would the palm print confirm I had a gun?
Nope.
So it turns out corroborative evidence is always a fraction of the overall case. Make sense? Now let's say I interviewed this suspect a week later. I said, dude, I know you were in that bank. I wasn't in that bank. I got videotape of you in the bank, stupid. Well, I was in the bank, but I wasn't doing a robbery. Really? I saw you walk over and write a demand note on the counter over here. That wasn't a demand note. That was a deposit slip. Okay. Then you came over to the teller and gave her and you started yelling at the teller. Oh, I was just upset I forgot my ID. That's why I ran out of the bank. Now, has this guy confessed to doing a robbery at the bank?
Nah.
Has he? No. Am I going to use his statement, though, in court?
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Talk too much.
Why? because he has backed into a set of, he's admitted he's in the bank at the time of the robbery, doing everything the other witnesses said were part of the robbery. He wants to redescribe it. He wants to call it something else, but he's given me a lot of facts that I'm going to use against him.
Facts.
Inadvertent statements that I'm going to use against him. Make sense? Something happens in the first century with these guys. They are not Christians. They don't believe it's true, but they back into certain claims that I'm going to write on this wall for you. Here's Thallus, for example, in 52 AD. On the whole world, there pressed the most fearful darkness. This is at the point of the crucifixion. And the rocks were rent by an earthquake, and many places in Judea and other districts were thrown down. This darkness, Thallus, in the third book of his history, calls, it appears to me without reason, an eclipse of the sun. So here we have a guy who's not a Christian, who saying that darkness that occurred at the resurrection, it wasn't supernatural. It was just an eclipse of the sun. But in order to back into that statement, he has to give us certain facts that he agrees are true. Apparently there's a guy named Jesus who was lived and then was crucified. And at his crucifixion, there was an earthquake and darkness.
Man, what do the people, I want to know, if you're somebody who's not a Christian right now, if you can be even a Muslim, but this is more or less for the atheist agnostics. What type of evidence do you need to believe in what it is that's true? When we look at just the world, when we look at everything that's come to be or what's been talked about, we all, for the most part, vast majority of people believe that there's a God because we can look out and see that there's a creator of some sort. The more that we discover about math and all these other things, we discover that these things are just that, discoveries, that they were here prior to. And we know that math are concepts that are in the mind. So if math was already here and we're just discovering it, and also we're discovering things like pi or the Mandelbrot set that are, to us anyway, infinite, where we will never ever be able to find out, at least in our lifetimes anyway, the end of these equations or numbers, where would they have come from? Wouldn't it make sense that points towards, the evidence points towards an eternal mind, creator who is beyond what you would know, the finite understanding that we live in this dimension? Wouldn't that make sense? When it comes to everything that points towards that there's a God, fine tuning, and all these other things, all these scientific understandings, when it comes to the philosophy side of things, when it comes to logic, all these things point towards God. And not only does it point towards God, when it gets down to the nitty gritty of who that God is, the Bible makes the clearest picture of that when it comes to just the historical evidence of the claims of the apostles and the prophets, all culminating into Jesus, who came to die on the cross for us, in which we're seeing this evidence right now. So what evidence is it that you really need? Now, all the people that at times anyway will say, oh, well, this isn't evidence, yada, yada, yada. We got cold case detectives talking about evidence right now. So I don't want to hear that nonsense of, oh, well, this ain't evidence. No, this is evidence. It's just that you don't want to believe it. Just like apparently this brother Thallus didn't want to believe what it is or why it is that there was an eclipse when the believers know. Let's get back to the video.
Now, it's not for why you Christians think it was, but he has to back into this. I'm in the bank, but I'm not doing a bank robbery. Do you see what he's doing here? So we know this about Jesus, even if we had no other evidence about Jesus, just from the statement of Thallus. Tacitus does something similar.
Big
The
T.
historian who's not a Christian, who's talking about the destruction of Rome by Nero. He says that consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus, and a most mischievous superstition. What could that be? A mischievous superstition. Thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular, kind of like Los Angeles. So the point is, he's going to offer that some things here that he thinks are true. He's not a Christian, not a believer, but he's confirmed certain facts. He's confirmed that Jesus was called Christ, and that he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. His followers persecuted. He's even confirmed something I won't go so far as to say. There is some kind of mischievous story out there. What could that be? The resurrection?
Maybe.
We may have the very first non-Christian account of the resurrection, at least being reported here, that people were talking about this as early as 56, 60, 65 AD. Here's Maraber Serapion, who is a Syrian philosopher, writing to his son about three philosophers. And he talks about Socrates and about Pythagoras.
That theorem.
Or the Jews, who he says murdered their wise king. After that, their kingdom was abolished. God rightly avenged these men. The wise king lived in the teachings he enacted. Here's a reference to Jesus. He's calling him the wise king. Apparently, the Jews caused his death in some way. Phlegon says this early on, quoted by Origen. In the 13th or 14th book, he said in his Chronicles, not only ascribed to Jesus a knowledge of future events, but also testified that the result corresponded to his predictions. And Jesus, while alive, was of no assistance to himself, but that they arose after death and exhibited the marks of his punishment and showed how his hands had been pierced by nails. These guys don't believe this is true. They're just reporting what they're hearing from others. But here's my point. If you lost every piece of Christian literature ever written by anyone, and all you had were the remarks and reports of non-Christians in the first 100 years, here's what you'd know about Jesus. Not bad.
Dang, that's a good bit.
It's touch point corroboration.
Looks like the truth.
And that to me is powerful. That's a lot of information.
A lot of information, powerful. Evidence, again, put out by cold case detectives, y'all. And the reason why I love these videos, right? And I love doing reactions and I love this channel is because I get to learn. And the goal is that when I get to learn about this stuff, that hopefully somebody who's actually not a believer or somebody who's shaken in their faith or maybe on the fence can learn about these things as well. And learn about, man, there's no reason to not know the truth. There's no reason to think that Jesus isn't who he said he was. No reason. And for the non-believer, to show them that, man, there's many reasons, many reasons. Again, this is just one. This is just the cold case view, the detective view on evidence that people like to talk about. It's not the scientific view. It's not the mathematic view. But yet those views are covered as well. It's funny to me how people that are atheists will love to run to the internet and all these other things, or these supposed scholars like Bart Ehrman, and then they'll say, oh, well, man, the gospel writers didn't write that, not knowing that we had people back in the 400s getting cooked and getting beat in debates by letting us know that we have church history to let us know that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote the gospels. We got church fathers from way back that show the lineage. And also when it comes to who wrote the gospels, why would anybody pick Mark and Luke? They're not even apostles. Wouldn't you have picked Thomas? Wouldn't you have picked Barnabas or Matthias? He was a new fella. Why not pick him? But no, they picked companions of, because they knew who was writing and they knew the work that was put in that was divinely inspired. So when you get scholars like that who say, oh man, well, we don't know because they were written late, or we don't have any manuscripts from the 1st century. All right. But yet when you actually look through the evidence in the work that we have from the church fathers, they'll let you know. Unattested for the first 400 years until some weird dude named Faustus came up and got cooked. It got cooked. But hey, they'll take that and say, oh, well, that's not true. They'll take all these other things. Like my sister was telling me about how she had a professor that taught about the different religions and how, oh man, well, Jesus is very much so like Dionysus. Very much so like Dionysus. His story is absolutely nothing like Dionysus. But yet these professors would tell you all this. Some of y'all atheists out there, and y'all run with that like, oh, it must be true because my professor said so. When, again, if you just look up the story of Dionysus, just how he was born is nothing like Jesus. Nothing like Jesus. They try to draw these weird comparisons, these weird similarities, and then a lot of the times that when they do compare them, these things are written after the time of Jesus about these people. Because you know they have many different stories. There's not just one story of Hercules. There's not just one story of Thor. There's not just one. There's many different stories that are told over time. But there's only one story about the true God. Only one story about the true God. So what type of evidence do you need? But that's what we're here for, man. That's why we're here to learn. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this video like I'm enjoying this video. Let's get back to it.
So we test our eyewitnesses. And as I tested the eyewitnesses, I think as much as they could ever be verified, these are reliable. Let me just say this to you about that. If there were no miracle accounts in the Gospels, nobody would distrust them.
Facts.
No serious historian. If Jesus was just a guy who came and preached the Sermon on the Mount, and that's all he ever did, just preach the Sermon on the Mount, no serious historian would ever doubt the existence or validity of the gospel accounts. They are only doubted because they contain supernatural elements. How about this? Are they honest and accurate over time, or have they changed? Here's a guy who put to jail. He was also on one of our Dateline. I should put a Dateline preview up here for this case, but this guy killed his wife in 1981, and he told everybody that she ran off, abandoning their small children, 5 and 8 years old.
Hey, yo, shout out to all the people out there. This goes to you women, because I think women usually do this. Shout out to all y'all women. Mothers, my mother, talking about some playing Dateline all the time, playing ID Discoveries if you ain't had cable back in the day. All these murder shows, murder podcasts, all these things. What's up with women doing that? Why y'all do that? Let me know down below. And y'all be scary too, though. That's the thing. Y'all love listening about murder. It'd be all dark. Y'all got a little popcorn, but then be worried about the slightest sound. It could be bright daylight outside, and y'all be terrified. What's up with that? Let's get back to the video.
And Carol, he said, just left, and everyone believed him. Even Carol's family believed him. We had no physical evidence because we believed him. In 1981, we took a missing persons report. We didn't work it till 1987. 6 years went by. When we finally decided this was a murder, we called the family and said, hey, she came home, right? She came, I mean, clearly you would have called us if she never came home. And they said, no, she never came home. What? You never called us? They believe she ran off. For 6 years, disappeared, no financial record, never shows up again anywhere, is now in the 2000s. Really? Yeah. We opened a case. We had no physical evidence, not a single picture of the crime scene because he had moved. We never worked it as a homicide. It was a missing persons case. Without a single piece of physical evidence, they convicted this guy in 4 hours. 4 hours. Keith Morrison said, this is the one case, Jim, I don't believe you got right. No one believed it. He confessed, though, at sentencing. So we know he's the killer. And the reason why we convicted him was because he changed his story over time. He had one story in 81. He had one story in 86. He had one story in 96. He had one story in 2012, one story in 2014.
Gotta keep up that lie.
You change your story over time, adding details that didn't exist prior, you're probably lying to me.
Hey, yo, shout out to Cold Case Christianity for that video. That was dope. That was amazing. So again, the evidence is there. The proofs is there, whatever you need. Stop trying to say that there's no evidence, because yes, there is. Don't be that guy or girl that's out there be like, no, no. But yet you hear teacher in school talk about some, oh, well, Krishna and Jesus are very similar. Don't show you no evidence. You don't care nothing about it. You just heard it and you're like, that's true. That's true. Or you get all this evidence like fine tuning, cosmological argument, and all these other things, logic, and yada, yada, yada. And you'll be like, but nah, I can't rock with that though. Why? Oh, no. What do you believe? I don't know what I believe. Nah, we can't do it like that. We got to know what the truth is. While we still got breath, while we're still able to get this understanding from these brothers that are putting out this work, from the sisters that are out there doing their thing, sharing the gospel, sharing the truth. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for, y'all. With that being said, man, if you made it to this point, God bless you. Hopefully you continue to stick around and watch some more videos and get some more understanding about whatever, Islam, heretics, the truth of who God is. We do that all here because we want to make sure that we equip people with the knowledge, the true knowledge of God. We're still breathing, y'all. We're still breathing. We can still have a relationship with God. And that's the crazy part. And it's the amazing part that the true God wants a relationship with you. He wants you to know him. He's given us all these ways. So if you're a science nerd, bam, you can see God there. If you're a philosophy nerd, bam, you can see God there. If you're just a theological nerd, bam, you can see everywhere the true God is there. He wants you to come on home. That's what he wants you to do. That being said, this is your boy, the Scripture Plug.Albert. I'll catch y'all next time. I'm out.